meeting is being recorded.
Welcome to Small Business Financing and Financial Planning, a beginner's guide presented by SCORE Westchester. I'm Arnie Sternheim, a SCORE mentor, and I'm your host for today's webinar. Scroll forward, please. Next slide. Let me tell you a bit about SCORE Westchester. You can see what our goal is, who we serve, who our clients are, and how to reach us. It is my pleasure and honor to host John Chester, today's presenter, who will speak to you. The chances that any of you will ever get to hear a person of John's expertise and experience without having to pay for it are slim and none. More important, John is not trying to sell you anything. Should you decide to follow up today's webinar by requesting a mentoring session with John or another financial expert, you will get for free a service that most of you could not afford. That's a good deal. So I would suggest you pay strong attention to what John has to say. He's the real deal and you will learn a lot. Next slide. Here's how this thing works. Everyone's muted. You can submit questions to Q&A, which in a chat, which I will see, and we will look to answer as many of the questions as possible, probably after the presentation.
Okay, so as Arnie said, I'm John Chester. I'll be presenting today's webinar on small business financing and financial planning. As Arnie just described, this webinar will demonstrate how financial planning is an essential and integral part of understanding and managing a business's finances, including figuring out how much money is needed to succeed. So here's today's agenda. The webinar firstly describes the pluses and minuses of the two main sources of small business capital, owner's investment versus borrowed funds. We will then use the case study method to build financial plans based on real-life examples, which will illustrate how the small business owner can understand and manage his or her financial situation over time. Simply put, financial planning is all about predicting the future financial performance of your business. To do this, your financial plan has to incorporate a lot of critical assumptions and business judgments that are an important part of your business plan. How you finance the startup and continued operation of your business is one of these. Other critical factors include assumptions and judgments you will have to make about the competition, about who your customers are, about the size, scope, and effectiveness of your sales and marketing efforts, whether your pricing is too high or too low, and whether you have the right cost structure. We'll go into this in more detail when we do some case studies later on. This presentation will include a lot of numbers. That's what financial planning is all about. Every business owner needs to understand the financial aspects of his or her business. If all of these numbers seem complicated to you, please reach out to us and we can help you one-on-one. We'll be glad to help you do some financial planning for your business. We're here to help. Also, for those of you in the audience who are actually CPAs, you may be able to tell there are certain places where I've taken some minor liberties for the sake of simplicity and clarity of presentation. So, sources of capital or financing for the small business or for any business. This slide shows that there are two fundamental sources of capital or financing for small businesses, equity or debt. On the left side of the slide, owner's equity is also known as owner's investment or shareholder's equity. As the name implies, it's the money that the owners invest in their business. Owner's investment is money at risk. In other words, a business owner's investment can be risky. It's also an investment in the sense that the owner usually expects some kind of return on his or her money. For example, if a rich relative left you $100,000, you could invest it in the stock market. In some years, you may get a 30% return on your investment in the stock market. In others, you could lose 30%. Or you could take that $100,000 and invest it in a new or existing business. This may or may not be riskier than an investment in the stock market, depending on the nature of the business and how prepared you are to be a small business owner. Many small business owners fail and lose a lot of their, or sometimes all of their investments, but many succeed and make a tremendous return over time as they build a sustainable, profitable business. Also, many investors get a lot of personal satisfaction by investing in and owning their own business over and above whatever financial rewards they're working for. So where do small business owners get money to invest? As the left side of the slide shows, business owners may tap their personal savings for their business, but also many hit up their rich friends and family members for money, particularly when they're just starting out. This is very common. Next, often business owners take on partners, which means that both parties invest in and own parts of the business. It's important in these cases that each partner have clearly defined responsibilities. And also in the case of a 50-50 partnership, there should be a mechanism in place for resolving disputes. This is particularly important if you own the business with your spouse or with close relatives, because family squabbling can jeopardize your ability to make and carry out decisions, and even in extreme cases, threaten the health of the business. Next on the list, some businesses can successfully attract outside investors, although this usually requires a solidly competitive product or service idea and a sound and well thought out business plan. Finally, if you reinvest profits in your business, that's actually adding more equity into the business. So turning now to the right side of the page, borrowed funds represent the second fundamental source of financing. Obviously, if you borrow money, you usually pay interest over time. You may think it's less risky to you since it's not your money at risk, but I'm sure you know borrowing money can be risky because lenders can make life very difficult for you. So where do small business owners borrow money from? First, you can actually borrow money from friends or family and pay them interest. Second, you can borrow on your business credit card, although we generally don't recommend this for startups since it can be expensive and you have to make monthly payments. On the other hand, using a credit card is a good way to establish a credit history for your new business if you aren't eligible to borrow from other sources. Next, you can borrow money from banks or credit unions. There are two basic types of bank loans. First, there's the revolving line of credit where, in simple terms, you borrow and repay as you need to. This is usually used when a business needs to borrow for only a part of the year. The second type of loan is called a term loan, where you can borrow a fixed amount and repay in regular monthly payments over typically 3, 5, or 7 years. Next on the list, the Small Business Administration assists small businesses by working with banks and other financial institutions to guarantee a portion of small business loans. This means that a small business may receive a loan from a bank with an SBA guarantee, a loan that the bank may have originally considered too risky to make. The SBA has 3 different loan programs available, which are detailed on its website. Next on the slide, there are specially chartered financial institutions whose mission is to support small businesses. These include Community Capital New York, Pursuit, which used to be known as the New York Business Development Corporation, and the Empire State Economic Development Fund. Given their social mission, rates and terms are usually a bit more attractive than other financial lenders. Next on the list, near the bottom, finally, there are lots of relatively new online lenders which specialize in lending to small and medium-sized businesses. Using an online lender can be dangerous to financially unsophisticated borrowers, and we urge borrowers to be very careful when considering them. Interest rates can be very, very high. I've heard of cases over 100%, and the loan terms can be unusual and very demanding. In other words, you and your lawyer should read the fine print carefully before borrowing. One way for small businesses to investigate the world of small business loans is to go to the score.org website and check out NAV or NAV, which is an online business financial management platform, as well as a SCORE sponsor. And they'll run you through a bunch of alternatives for your business. Finally, at the bottom, crowdfunding is usually used for more project-oriented one-time purposes. For example, like funding the development of a prototype or funding an art or entertainment production. Money raised from crowdfunding can be considered equity or borrowed funds, or more usually a sale of the product in question, which means the IRS will probably tax you. So be careful here. Also, as you know, so sites like GoFundMe are used by charities to collect contributions from donors. All right, so going back to owner's investment for a minute, let's make a few points. For startups, the owner's personal funds are usually the first money to be invested to start a business. In fact, potential lenders usually require small businesses to have contributed a significant amount before they are eligible for a loan. Often this is 50% or more of the initial funding for the business. As we said previously, the owner's investment is money at risk, and you could make a lot or lose a lot. Another point, once you put your money in, it's sometimes hard to get it back. Getting your initial investment back may mean you have to close your business and liquidate assets or sell the business to someone else. On the other hand, if you're very profitable and you haven't borrowed any money, then you can start taking money out of the company to pay yourself a decent salary. Talk to your accountant about the best way to do this. Bear in mind that when you take money out of the company, you're using funds that could be used to reinvest and grow the business. Our final point is that partners and shareholders have rights and expectations and may exercise a fair amount of influence in how you run your business. So make sure your role in the company is clearly defined. So going back to borrowing money on the next slide says it all. As we've discussed, lenders often require a significant investment from the owners before they consider a loan. Next, most lenders require a well thought out business plan. If you don't have one, SCORE can help you put one together. Next, lenders are going to assess the credit worthiness of your business, and they're probably going to look at your personal credit. Also, lenders sometimes require a personal guarantee, which means that if your business runs into trouble, you may be obligated to repay any loan out of your personal assets. Lenders may ask for a security interest in property owned by your business. Next, lenders will impose covenants and restrictions on your business, which means that it will carefully monitor your business's financial performance on a regular basis. In some cases, if your business is struggling to pay interest or principal, the lender will take an active interest in how you run your business. Finally, and most importantly, borrowed money has to get paid back. So how do you know you can service a loan? We'll get into that in more detail in the next section when we do some case studies in financial planning. How do lenders evaluate borrowers? How do they decide to give your business a loan? Well, here we have the proverbial 5 C's of credit. So to be fair, I've seen 3 different versions of the 5 C's, and this is just one. The first C is character. What this boils down to is, what are your qualifications and experience to run your business? Are you likely to be a responsible borrower? The second C is credit, which is an evaluation of your credit worthiness, both business and personal. Third C stands for capacity. Why specifically do you want to borrow money? Do you have a good business plan? Does that business plan show how the borrowed funds will improve the health and competitiveness of your business? Also, do the owners have the ability and capacity to manage the business properly? The fourth C, cash flow, means, does your financial plan show how you can pay interest and repay the loan? Finally, does the business have any collateral for a loan? beyond physical assets, is the business itself worth anything after all the loans have been repaid? By the way, SCORE Westchester has several mentors who are ex-commercial bankers, and they'll be glad to help you with your financing questions. So now we're going to start doing some case studies in financial planning to show how all this works. We're going to work through a couple of real-life examples of individuals who are ready to start businesses. So the first case is Jason's food truck. This is an important case to learn from because during my time at SCORE, I've had several cases almost exactly like this one. So Jason has 10 years of experience as a cook in a restaurant. He has perfected a delicious barbecue sauce, has decided to sell ribs out of a food truck. While a new food truck costs $40,000, he finds a used one in good condition. Thinking the truck is way underpriced at $15,000, he moves quickly, paying $5,000 down and signing a contract to pay the remaining $10,000 over the next 2 years. Jason lives with his mother and has little money and no assets. To buy the truck, he uses up all his savings and gets half the down payment from his brother. So was he smart to buy the truck? And what does he need to know really to get into business? And now that he's the proud owner of a food truck, before anything else, he needs to understand the market for his world-famous ribs. Who is likely to buy from a food truck and when are they likely to buy? Also, are there any competing trucks out there? So this boils down to where exactly should he locate his truck and when should he be open? Once he picks a site, he needs to get whatever permits, registrations, licenses are required by his city to locate the truck there. In Jason's case, it turned out it usually takes 6 months for a food truck vendor to get a permit. Next, he has to think about where he's going to buy supplies from, and does he need to hire anyone to help him? All of these questions should be resolved before he opens, and many of them will cost money up front. So where is it going to come from? Remember, Jason used up all his money just for the down payment on the truck. So before we go any further, it should be obvious by now that there are things Jason should have thought about in considerable detail before he spent his life savings on the truck. So Jason goes to the bank to ask for a loan. So what does the bank think? Does Jason, they're going to say, who is this guy? Do you have a relationship with us? Then they'll ask Jason about his experience and whether he's ever managed a business before. Then they'll want to see his business plan. Then they'll want to see his financial plan. Jason's financial plan should show how much more money he's going to need and how and when his growing business will be able to pay it back. So to sum up Jason's food truck case, of course he wasn't able to qualify for any kind of loan, particularly since he already owed $10,000 on the truck and he didn't know when he could pay it off. Before we feel sorry for Jason, in this real life example, it turns out that Jason was able to get some money from his brother, who was a doctor. All right, so let's move on to the second case study, Julia's wine shop. This is another real life example. Julia has 3 years of experience as a retail sales associate for a local wine store, and now she knows as much as anyone about wine. She has become a highly skilled salesperson. She has also established strong relationships with wholesaler suppliers. She decides to open a wine store of her own. She needs $100,000 to open, consisting mostly of rent and inventory. To open her store, Julia will use $10,000 she has invested in the stock market, and she plans to borrow $10,000 from her IRA. Her parents will chip in $20,000. So the question is, will Julia find another $60,000 to open her shop? So before we answer the question of whether she can raise the $60,000, there are 2 points to make here on this slide. First, Julia plans to take money from her IRA. Unless she's older than 59 and a half, she may have to pay a penalty to to the IRS. Second, her parents are chipping in $20,000. Does that mean they own some of her business or not? Do they ever expect to get it back? We would recommend in this case that Julia make sure she clearly defines their role in her business and their rights and responsibilities, maybe even in writing. So just like Jason, Julia has a lot of work to do before signing a lease and opening her store. She has to understand the market opportunity, who her customers are, what they are likely to buy, and who her competition is. She should have a well thought out sales and marketing plan to draw customers to her store. Ideally, her sales and marketing plan will succeed in differentiating her from the competition. She should have established a firm working relationship with her suppliers and her landlord. All of this background research will form the basis for a business plan. And all of these business planning decisions will be reflected in the financial plan. In fact, she should have a very good idea of what it's going to take to break even before she signs the lease. And of course, she needs to know the answer to these questions before she can approach a lender for a loan. So, did Julia find another $60,000 to open her store? Well, it turns out that she was able to get very favorable terms from her landlord to entice her to take the space. And she also received decent terms from her suppliers. So she was able to reduce that $60,000 and reduce the size of her initial borrowing to a size that the bank would approve. Next, we're going to start doing some numbers now. Case study number 3, Sam's Group Family Daycare Home. So daycare in the state of New York is a regulated industry. A group family daycare home must have 2 caregivers and no more than 16 children. All right, so Sam and his spouse own a modest home in Westchester with a sizable full finished basement. Sam has 5 years of experience as a licensed child care professional in a daycare center. He decides to open a group family daycare home, which has 16 children and 2 caregivers. He needs $40,000. To open the facility, Sam will use $10,000 in personal savings, and he plans to borrow $10,000 from an IRA. Of course, we have the same problems before with the IRA. Parents would chip in $5,000. The home is already mortgaged. So will Sam find another $15,000 to open for business? If so, how? So let's go through some of the questions Sam should spend some time answering in advance before he does his financial plan. Hopefully you'll recognize that these are the same questions Jason and Julia had to answer. First and foremost, what's the market like? What's the opportunity? Is his house in the best location? Does his local community need another daycare center? Is his house near obvious employment centers? Who is the competition and how do they compete? Do they compete on price or something else? Is there an important competitor near his house? Who are the target customers? How much can they pay? How price sensitive are they? Given the answer to these initial questions, how is Sam going to compete in the marketplace? What is Sam's sales and marketing plan? Will his marketing efforts support the price he can charge? What is Sam's edge, his unique selling proposition? Why will customers let him take care of their children? And what is his break-even level of sales? So what will it take to qualify for a loan? So repeat, these are the questions Sam must think about before doing a business plan, which will then be reflected in the numbers he develops in his financial plan. So we're gonna actually work through Sam's financial plan. These are the 5 worksheets we're going to prepare for Sam. Okay, so his first job is to detail his startup costs, which total $40,000. As shown in the table, there are 2 kinds of startup spending, fixed and operating. Spending on fixed assets includes buying equipment, real estate, cars, and other physical assets. In this case, Sam plans to spend $22,000 on equipment, furniture, and fixtures to turn his basement into a daycare home. Of this, $2,000 is included as other contingency. Contingencies include cost overruns and other items he didn't expect. A good number to use here is 10%. Initial spending on operating assets at the bottom includes all other expenses that would be incurred before opening. So you see here the list of items for Sam's daycare. He's spending a total of $18,000 in operating assets, including a sizable amount, $5,000, on pre-opening advertising. Sam will start his business with $2,000 in cash. So the question I have for you is, do you think that's going to be enough? We'll answer that question in a few minutes. This is how Sam plans to finance his business. In this case, Sam puts in $25,000 and he's able to finance $5,000 of equipment purchases through the vendor. Sam assumes for now that he can get a $10,000 loan. Notice that Sam has invested more than half of the total funds required to start his business. As a rule of thumb, 50% is the minimum required by banks and other lenders. The next step in the financial plan are fixed costs. Let's talk about Sam's fixed costs. A fixed cost is a cost that doesn't change with the volume of business. It's likely to be about the same amount from month to month. A major component of fixed costs is employee related, salaries, wages, and benefits. First, let's prepare a salaries, wages, and benefits spreadsheet. In this spreadsheet, Sam has assumed there will be 2 employees as required by regulation. One employee will get $20 per hour or $3,200 per month. The other gets $15 per hour or $2,400 per month. Notice Sam has included a salary for himself as the owner director. Always include yourself in your financial plan. You have to figure out if the business you are starting will be strong enough to pay your salary. Next, Sam adds payroll taxes and benefits, if any. As an employer, Sam has to pay FICA and Medicare tax for his employees, which is 7.65% of wages. This is separate from the 7.65% that employees have to pay, which is usually deducted from their paychecks. And by the way, there's an error on this slide. In 2022, Social Security tax is assessed against the first $147,000 in wages, up from $132,900, which is the 2019 number. Next, there are a lot of nuisance and other smaller taxes, as you can see on the slide. Next, notice that Sam has to pay for workers' compensation insurance. New York State is militant about ensuring that every small business is signed up for workers' comp. They have been known to fine you up to $10,000 per employee not covered. And it's also very inexpensive. So we recommend that you get workers' comp insurance. Some very small businesses may be exempt. Next, towards the bottom, Sam decides to offer health insurance for his employees, which is very generous in today's world, as health insurance can be very costly. So total payroll taxes and benefits, you can take a shortcut and just calculate, it's 33.55% of wages. And a good way of forecasting that is just to use some assumption for that percentage. So at the bottom, Sam expects to spend about $7,500 a month on salaries, wages, and benefits each and every month he's open. That's why it's called a fixed cost. Next, Sam estimates the non-employee fixed monthly costs he will incur to operate his business. These include advertising, utilities, office and educational supplies, repairs, travel, et cetera, as well as a 10% contingency. So this totals $3,245 per month. And again, Sam expects to spend about this a month each and every month. Also notice that Sam is not paying rent. So totaling up Sam's fixed cost to operate his business will cost him $10,854 per month, or $130,248 per year to operate his business, even with no revenue. So this includes about $7,500 for salaries, wages, and benefits, $3,250 in fixed costs, and there's $125 in there for interest on his loan per month. So Sam has to find a way to generate $130,248 in revenue in his first year of operation. So now we're going to look at the next spreadsheet in his financial plan, his sales forecast. This might be the most difficult spreadsheet to complete because it requires a lot of judgment on Sam's part. Projected revenue for Sam's business is the product of volume, which is the number of paying customers times price. The number of paying customers here is really the number of children Sam hopes to care for. So the first thing Sam does is forecast how many children will enroll in his daycare home and when. In this case, we show that Sam enrolls an average of 2 in January, 4 in February, and so on. Like many small businesses, it takes a while to attract paying customers. So Sam reaches full capacity, 100% of the legal limit, only in the fourth quarter. Forecasting the volume of business is often difficult, but it's critically important. In this case, Sam is conservatively assuming that it will take time for his advertising to work and for him to successfully sell his daycare services to parents. Next, Sam has to test out the price he hopes to charge. For simplicity, Sam starts out by assuming he will charge the average weekly rate for daycare in Westchester County. So we've chosen here to use 2018 number, which is for a normal year before the pandemic. These are real numbers. So for example, that's $260 to watch a preschooler per week and $213 to watch a school-age child per week. So doing the math, Sam projects that he will earn $2,080 in revenue in January, $4,160 in February, and so on. At full capacity in the fourth quarter with 16 children, Sam will earn $47,664 in that quarter. So total revenue at this pricing level, given the slow startup for the year, is projected to be $116,300. So we've put together the revenues we've just projected with Sam's fixed monthly costs. As you can see, Sam projects that he will lose money in the first 2 quarters, largely because he doesn't have enough children in daycare. In other words, he doesn't have enough paying customers. This slow ramp up is disappointing since Sam plans to spend $5,000 on pre-opening marketing. As highlighted in yellow, Sam is very close to break even in the third quarter, where he loses only $1,347. In fact, if we extrapolate and look closely, the break even for Sam's business is achieved in September with an average of 11 children, which is 83% of the maximum number allowed and 70% of total students allowed. It's 83% of maximum number of preschoolers allowed and 70% of the total students allowed. So as you can see in the fourth quarter is projected to be profitable since Sam is at 100% of capacity. Remember, this forecast is based on the fact that Sam assumes he will charge the average price for Westchester. At this average price, and given his fixed costs, he needs to operate at near full capacity to break even. So remember, Sam was expected to start his business with just $2,000 in spare cash. This means that he runs out of money in the first quarter because he's spending $10,194 more than he's bringing in revenue in the first quarter. Most startup businesses lose money when they first open because it takes time to attract customers. That means business owners have to have a fair amount of spare cash or some other way to access additional money to survive until they reach the break-even point. Okay, so what are the key factors for Sam to reach break-even? And what is this financial planning model telling you as a business owner? In Sam's case, the volume of paying customers, in other words, the number of children he's caring for, is very important. The volume of customers depends on the price he's charging. Sam's business at the average price level needs high capacity utilization, above 65% all year long to break even. In other words, Sam's daycare has to be substantially booked all the time. In this case, the price is low enough and attractive enough that he can get to 100% of capacity in the fourth quarter. Sam's marketing program is also important. He's spending $500 a month. An effective marketing program may enable Sam to charge a higher price than he would otherwise. But remember, Sam spent $5,000 in pre-opening marketing costs, and it still took 9 months to get enough students to break even. So maybe Sam needs to rethink his business plan assumptions on sales and marketing. Another obvious factor is Sam's cost structure. Is there any way to reduce costs, particularly in the first 2 quarters? This may be difficult since it looks like he's paying close to minimum wage as it is. So, with this financial plan, can Sam get a $10,000 loan? We also saw, not only does he need $10,000 to open, we also saw that he's going to lose $10,000 in his first quarter and another $7,600 in the second quarter. What bank is going to lend him $10,000 when he needs a further $17,600 in the next 6 months? So he really needs close to $30,000 before he breaks even. Good thing Sam did a financial plan in advance. Given the financial plan we just went over, Sam may find it difficult to get a loan. His problem is one of timing. He needs to get 10 to 12 students enrolled right away in the first quarter. Maybe he shouldn't open at all until he's fully booked. Alternatively, Sam's best chance to get a bank loan is to show them a list of committed customers who have put down a deposit. Better yet, it can require customers to prepay in advance to reserve a spot, thereby reducing the amount of money he needs to borrow. Recognize here that the necessity of being fully booked when he opens will have important implications for his pre-opening sales and marketing plan, as well as Sam's entire business plan, which he will now revise accordingly. Okay, fourth and last case. This one's a little bit more complicated. A lot of the concepts in this case are similar to Sam's daycare, so we'll go a little faster. Anne tends to start, this is Anne's nursery. Anne tends to start a much bigger business, selling shrubs and plants, both retail and wholesale. She has years of experience in the nursery business, so lots of important contacts and substantial personal financial resources. She thinks she can reach $1 million in sales in 3 years. She's already spent a considerable amount of time putting together a business plan. Now she needs a financial plan. So we're going to build a financial plan for Anne. Here are the 5 spreadsheets we're going to put together, including a break-even analysis. So let's start off just like with Sam. We'll start off with startup costs. Anne intends to start this much bigger business. Her startup costs total almost $500,000. Like Sam, she has to invest in fixed assets and operating assets to open her business. The first major decision as a business owner, should she buy a piece of property for her nursery or should she rent? We assume here today that she's renting, so she doesn't have to spend anything on real estate. So nevertheless, Anne will spend a total of $385,000 on fixed assets, as detailed on the top part of the slide, as well as $93,550 on operating assets before she opens her business. Notice once again that she set aside money for contingencies in each category. Also notice Anne will open her business with only $5,000 of cash, which we can guess is probably not going to be enough. So this slide shows Anne's sources of initial funding for her business. As we said before, Anne has substantial personal resources and she decides to put in about 70% or $338,550 of the total funding required. She's able to finance the vehicles and equipment with vendors. She could probably qualify for a commercial loan, thereby reducing the amount she has to put in. What will it take for her to get a loan? The lenders are going to judge her personal qualifications and her extensive business experience, her personal credit, as well as the prospects for the business. In other words, they want to see the business plan that she has already written for her nursery. And of course, lenders are going to want to see her financial plan. So let's assume this is her first attempt to do a financial plan. In order to save time, we skipped a couple of spreadsheets, but clearly Anne has to go through the same analysis of fixed cost that Sam did in the last case. But to sum up, Anne calculates that she will incur $25,000 in fixed expenses every month, consisting of $14,500 in salaries, $99.50 in other fixed costs, and $550 in interest. This means Anne will incur about $300,000 of fixed costs every year, even before she has any revenue. The next step is the preparation of the sales forecast. The sales forecast is her best judgment of how effective she will be as a salesperson, and how effective her marketing program will be. For simplicity, Anne has assumed she's selling plants, which are probably trees or shrubs, for an average of $100 each. This is the point where she makes an initial opening assumption about the pricing. In the real world, she would probably try to forecast sales for every major type of plant, but for now, we'll just average it all out. Anne assumes for now that she will sell generic plants at an average of $100 each. She gets plants from suppliers at $60 each in January. This is called the cost of goods sold, abbreviated on the slide as COGS. COGS is also called a variable cost. It's a cost directly associated with a sale. There is no variable cost without a sale. So for each plant she sells, Anne initially makes a profit of $40 a plant, or 40%. Notice Anne's business is seasonal, as you might expect of her nursery. Most of her sales are in the second quarter. In the second quarter and the third quarter, Anne assumes her supplier costs are a little better, so she's making $45 per plant sold. So totaling it all up for the year at the right, in year one, she forecasts she will sell $550,000 worth of plants, and she will make $240,000 in gross profit dollars. So her gross margin percentage for the year is 43.6%. So let's talk about gross profit and gross margin. Gross profit and gross margin are important variables to consider in developing a financial plan. Gross profit in dollar terms is sales minus cost of sales. Gross margin is gross profit dollars divided by sales dollars and is expressed as a percentage. These numbers are important because they're used to calculate the break-even point. So this slide shows how we calculate Ann's break-even point. We know that Ann is generating $550,000 in sales and $240,000 in gross profit dollars. She's also incurring $300,000 in fixed costs, so she's losing money under her initial assumptions. To calculate the level of sales necessary to cover that $300,000, she divides the $300,000 of fixed costs by her gross margin percentage of 43.6%. As shown in this slide on the bottom right, Ann's break-even is $688,000, which is more than the revenue she's projecting in her first year of operation. So I'm going to let you copy this formula for a minute here. So here's Ann's projected income statement. We're going to put together the sales forecast with her fixed costs. So we'll get a profit and loss statement for her first year. As you can see, Ann loses a lot of money in the cold winter months, the first and fourth quarters, makes a profit in the second quarter. Assuming she collects all her revenue and pays her bills promptly, and that there are no other major expenditures, Ann needs to come up with some additional cash early on to pay her fixed costs in the first and second quarters. In fact, for the year, she needs about another $60,000 to stay in business. You can see she makes money only in the second and third quarters. Fortunately, Ann hasn't gone into business yet. Her financial plan is a projection of what might happen. It's showing her that there are some problems with her initial assumptions. She needs to revise her business plan assumptions, including her opening price of $100 per plant. How can Ann actually make a profit? Firstly, Ann needs to understand the relationship between price and volume. The key question is, how price sensitive is her business? If she can raise prices without reducing the number of plants sold, then she'll generate more gross profit dollars, which can be used to cover fixed costs. It's also possible that if she lowers her prices, then the volume of plants sold will increase significantly, thereby also increasing the gross profit dollars that can be used to cover fixed costs. This is an important judgment to make in every business. It requires an assessment of the competition and where she stands in the marketplace. Ann has a lot of experience, so she can probably make this judgment. For entrepreneurs who are just starting out, this is more difficult. Moving down the slide, another factor is, can Ann increase sales by creating a more effective sales and marketing plan? The sales and marketing plan will support her price and volume assumptions. Moving down the slide, maybe Ann's costs are too high. Maybe she can reduce her cost structure. Taking a hint from Sam, why is a nursery open in the winter? Maybe she shouldn't open until March 1st. Next, maybe Ann could get a better deal from her suppliers, raising her gross margin percentage. Finally, maybe Ann should think about her entire business model. Maybe she should be just a wholesaler. Maybe she should only sell over the internet. So can Ann get a commercial loan? Before we answer that question, let's review the information that's already gone into her business plan and her financial plan. What does Ann need to know to be successful? First, she should understand her marketplace. How large is the market? Where is the demand? Second, she should study the competition. What is their strategy? Are they competing on price, on service? Are they competing on the variety of product offerings, on their advertising campaign? Next, Anne should know her customer. What combination of product and service are customers looking for in a nursery? Can they afford to pay the price Anne intends to charge? Finally, she should know how effective her advertising and promotion efforts are likely to be. Do nursery customers respond to social media, or are they more receptive to more traditional forms of print and broadcast advertising? Or do they respond primarily to Anne's direct selling efforts? Fortunately, Anne has already thought a lot about these issues because she's almost completed her business plan. And she can discuss all aspects of her business plan in considerable detail with potential lenders. So how can Anne make a profit and get a loan? There are actually two answers to this question. First, Anne reviews the assumptions in her business plan and realizes that she's been too conservative and unrealistic about the prices she can charge after assessing the competition. In fact, she can plug new prices into her spreadsheet to figure out the price where she will break even, assuming no change in the volume. That turns out to be $125 per plant, assuming the same gross margin percentage. But secondly, it turns out that she didn't have to change her assumptions. She just needed more time. Remember, we said Anne expected to reach $1 million in sales. Well, we discover here on this slide that she continues to grow her business, making some more money in year 2, and a whole lot of money in year 3, $1 million in sales. This is very typical of startup businesses. It takes a while to build a base of repeat business and to develop a reputation in the marketplace. So can Anne get a commercial loan? Yes, we believe she can. She will go back and tweak her financial plan by adjusting pricing, costs. She'll open in March instead of January, and she'll adjust her sales and marketing plans so she is profitable sooner. She can build a healthy business and repay a loan. So what are the benefits of financial planning? Hopefully by now, after going through 4 case studies, you'll see how powerful a tool financial planning really is. First, you'll match your concept with your personal income goals and figure out whether your new business can actually pay you the money you need to support yourself and for your other personal objectives. You'll get a better understanding of how risky your plan is. It's also a tool for looking at your business decisions in advance. You can vary your assumptions and change them and see how it comes out. Next, you can track yourself against the results. And finally, it's usually 100% necessary for investors and lenders. They're going to want to look at your financial plan. Also, they'll help you test out your key assumptions, whether or not they're the right assumptions and whether or not they're not working for you. It's really a very powerful modeling tool to help you evaluate all sorts of different factors. And you can track yourself against your plan. And hopefully when you put it together and it's consistent with your business plan, it'll show you that your new business
Hi, everybody. It looks like our presenter, John, has lost connection to the webinar. Just bear with us for a couple of minutes. Let's see if we can get him back on the Zoom.
Hello.
Hi, John.
Literally, as I finished my presentation, we had a power failure here and threw me off the system.
Got it. No problem. So everyone, we still have our attendees are still on. So
Should I go?
So
you
it's time
wanna-
for Q&A.
yeah, okay, that's a good.
Okay,
good segue.
there aren't many questions. Should I go?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead, Arnie.
Okay. Okay, thank you, John. There aren't many questions, but they're usually the same ones. First of all, people want to know if the PowerPoint, today's presentation is available. Yes, it is. And the second one is similar question. Financial planning, do we offer a financial planning template online? Yes, we do, and I think you just saw it.
Yes. Score.org. You can find two templates on score.org, one for new business and one for existing business. Just search for financial planning template.
And there was one other question that I don't know if you can answer. The question is, are there any financial benefits to getting a loan or grant if you have or will apply for being a minority-owned business in New York?
The SBA has a special program where they arrange for you to be mentored closely as a minority or disadvantaged borrower. It's called the 8A program. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be favored to get a loan. However, it should be noted that most SBA guaranteed loans that are made by people like Community Capital are specifically designed to favor smaller businesses, particularly those that may be disadvantaged. Usually, if you qualify as a minority-owned business, it favors you to get contracts from the federal government or the state government. So that's really the primary benefit, not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily help your ability to borrow money.
Okay. One of our SCORE mentors chimed in and said, you can normally borrow against your 401k plan penalty free. The second, another person attendee has asked, how do you, if you want to view this, the recorded presentation, how do you do that?
I'm sorry.
Uh,
I think that
What is
question's for me, I think. We'll be sending out the recording and the slides via email later today.
Yes, you may be able to borrow against your retirement plans, but I think you ought to be careful and consult a financial advisor before you do so that you do not incur a penalty.
And one other question, can you please go over profit and net losses and show how to pay yourself?
We usually actually recommend that small business owners consult their accountant about the best way to get money out of a business. There are 2 or 3 different ways of doing it. You can actually pay a salary, or you can forego your salary and take a distribution. They have slightly different tax effects, and actually we recommend that you go consult a CPA to figure out what's best for your business. But the important point I was trying to make is you want to understand the financial strength of your business and whether or not it's going to make enough money that you can actually afford to quit your day job or and afford to pay yourself what you need to live. So that's why we recommend that you put in an estimate of your own salary and what you're going to pay yourself, and you will have to pay Social Security tax on that. So that's why we set it up like that. That's the whole point of the financial plan. Is it going to really pay you as the owner enough money to meet your needs?
Here's an interesting question. In Ann's case, how can we determine the maximum unit sale capacity with her initial fixed cost?
I think we Arnie may have cut out, but
Yeah, I think we lost you for a second, John, but Arnie, why don't you repeat your question for John?
How can we determine the maximum unit sale capacity with her initial fixed cost? That is for Ann. It's a question about maximum unit sale capacity.
That's a good question, and I think it really depends. That's sort of a judgment Ann has to make as to the physical characteristics of her operation. In other words, how large is it? How much inventory does she have? How many employees can actually process orders and that sort of thing. So that's a judgment that she has to make, and it's actually part of running a business. So you're right. It may turn out that she needs to sell a certain amount of plants, but she doesn't have the physical ability to do so. That's something she should basically check in advance, but there's no financial way of doing that. It's really an operational question.
I think here's a real good one. If you incorporate it as a corporation, is there a time frame when investors expect to start receiving ROI or vested? Is it 1, 3, 5 years, or after a certain amount of company profits are made? In other words, when do investors expect a return?
You know, that depends a lot on what kind of business you're talking about and what your business plan says. So you're going to present investors with your business plan and a financial projection model, and that model is going to be used to attract the investor. And so you try to make an arrangement with the investor as to what the returns have to be for them to invest in your business. Different businesses have different financial characteristics. Some internet startups and tech companies may take quite some time to be profitable, and investors are aware of that, but the returns could be that much greater if you wait longer. So, but other types of businesses, investors are going to want to see a return very quickly.
Okay.
There's no simple answer to that question.
I think we're done with the questions, and I just want to thank people for tuning in. And the real value, in addition to the incredible value John just provided, is to have someone like John look at your business, to do for your business what he just did for the 4 case studies. That's the real value here. And the good news is it's free. And that is a good deal. So I would urge you to contact us at SCORE to have John or another financial expert, financial analytical expert, look at your business this closely. It can save you a lot of money. It can save you a lot of heartache and give you a better shot at succeeding.
So actually, I wanted to make one more comment and address the question of borrowing from your IRA or retirement plan in order to finance a new business. So the comment has to do with risk versus reward. You may be able to borrow and invest in a new business, but remember that investment carries a lot of risk. So you're basically risking your retirement on your new business idea. So just bear that in mind when you do that, because that could be very risky depending on the nature of the business and your business plan. So just take an extra level of caution when you consider doing that.
I believe there is a request for mentoring form, part of your registration for this webinar. Okay. Well, thank you all very much for attending. I hope you found this valuable, and I hope we will hear from some of you very soon. Have a nice day.